Let's get a quick check on the markets this morning. Joe Kinahan joins us right now from the CME in Chicago. He's chief derivative strategist at the TD Ameritrade. And good morning. It's good to see you. Also, Steve Leishman is here with us on set this morning. But, JJ, why don't we start things off with you and just talk a little bit about what's happening, what you see with some of this movement in and out of the headlines around the fiscal cliff. It's not adding up to a lot of volatility overall, even though we have seen some swings in what's happening with the major averages.
No, it's actually almost to the point where maybe we should get the NHL guys in and the government all at the same time and solve both on the same day. But, really, Beck, it's kind of interesting right now. You look at the S&Ps, they're not really moving much, but there is some things to trade. People down here, you got gold down almost 1%. And you touched on one of the stocks that I think gave the market quite a bit of hope today in Toll Brothers. You talked about their backlog orders and their orders coming up. The really amazing part is those orders are up 70%. Going forward. So we are seeing a lot of positive signs in the economy. It's almost like, talking to so many of the other traders down here, everyone's kind of like, I wish the government would just get out of the way almost. Get this thing solved and get on the sidelines and it is true, Joe, and let the market take care of things, because I think what the Toll Brothers thing showed, you had the CEO of AutoZone on earlier today. The one message that I think is coming through from so many of these CEOs is there's pent up demand right now. It's just that people are afraid because all they're hearing is constant bad news with the fiscal cliff. We really need to get it solved and just get it on the sideline so the market can take care of itself. Just give us a game plan.
Yes, that was CEO of AutoNation. Right, Mike Jackson. That was interesting what he said, though, that he has not seen any slowdown in consumer spending to this point, and is starting to wonder if he's just worrying too much, which, maybe from the consumer's perspective, that's what's going on here. Maybe we're focusing too much on this. Although, the other thing we heard, Joe, is Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, told us that when he talks to small businesses, a lot of them are his clients, when he talks to them, it really is an impact on what they do in terms of their planned spending and their planned hiring.
Well, and I agree with that, Becky, and I think, with the healthcare, et cetera, talking to a lot of my friends who own small businesses, I would agree with him 100%. But in the end, what it really comes down to is there's so many smart people running these businesses. They'll find a way to make things work. The problem they've had is that regulations are constantly changing. They're not sure what tax policy is going to be. What we really need, in terms of leadership, and it's not a Democrat, Republican type of thing, it's come out and give us the rules and make the rules stay in place for a couple of years. That's really the biggest problem we have right now. And I know, Joe, you've talked about this before, but as we get closer and closer to this, you're hearing more and more CEOs say it. Again, when there's pent-up demand, people are afraid to hire. We need people to hire now, and if they had the rules around it, they could actually go out and do so. It really kind of aggravates me to watch this day after day, to talk to many of my friends who do own these types of business, who are like, I need to hire, but I'm not going to because I don't know how much it's going to cost me in 3 months if I hire someone right now.
Steve, you've been focusing on jobs this morning, too.
Yeah. We got a little bit of a jobs report that, I'm interested that Joe is just not interested in. Joe, you're... it doesn't matter anymore. Put it this way: we did bill the last two jobs reports as the most important jobs reports of the century.
Right.
This is a squirrely one, in part because we have the Sandy effect in there, and I think Joe's right. There is going to be, to an extent, a Sandy effect in there. I just want to show you first the claims chart. This is a chart we've been putting up every week since Hurricane Sandy came through, and what it shows is the pattern of Sandy jobless claims relative to Katrina. Guys, if we don't have that chart, what I can tell you
is, it in preview.
There it is. Great. So it goes up, and now we're in the down. It may pop back, but the trouble is that that big surge there is probably in the week of, or is going to affect the week of the employment survey.
The last week.
Okay. And now, guys, if you have the next one back there, I don't know if you have it. You can see there. What we show there is that we're looking for only 80,000 jobs on Friday. 95 in the private sector. That's a big drop. It might be hurricane related, but it could also be cliff related. There's these two things. It's like, just backing up what Joe says, folks, we got enough to worry about. Without the stuff that we could probably fix and move on, there's enough going on. You can see that we're going to be substantially below the 6-month average that we've been running there. And that shows that we were not robust to begin with. And this is why guys at the Fed are concerned about things like this. If you're growing 3 or 4% GDP, you have some give. You have some ability to absorb a shock. We don't have that ability. We're growing 2%. As I explained last time, the 2.7% GDP was not it wasn't a robust 2.7% GDP growth. It's more like a 2.25% economy. Not a lot to give before you have a one handle on it. And that's why everybody is, I think, correctly worried about the effect of the cliff. Yeah, Joe.
Sorry, one question for you. And so I'm just hearing this anecdotally, maybe you know better. I'm also hearing that, usually we would see a little bit of a downward spike in jobless claims at this time of year and perhaps a better unemployment because the retail hires some part-time workers at this time of year. From what I understand, that hasn't been the case as much as we've seen in past years either.
Just so you know, a couple things. The first is that, in general, seasonal adjustments are made just for the season, right? So there's an expectation in the numbers you're going to get a surge in hiring. That said, because of the past 5 years have been so anomalous or just so many big shifts and swings, the seasonals are a little weird and not as reliable as they had been. I would not, if I saw a big surge in retail hiring on the not seasonally adjusted, they probably should be taken off. So not too concerned about that. The jobless claims, again, we know they were affected by Hurricane Sandy. What we don't know is how much. It seems to be following a very similar pattern to Katrina. And now the expectation, by the way, is that we lose a quarter to a half a point of growth in the fourth quarter because of that. But one more thing I just want to show is Texas versus the United States when it comes to unemployment. Governor, you started off in a similar place. I started at the beginning of the recession. And it looks like just lately you're doing a little better than the United States. The United States unemployment rate ticked up. Texas the past couple months has ticked down. 6.6% unemployment rate in Texas versus 7.9% in the United States. It's still a problem, though. Are you happy with that number? Does that feel like it's normal to you? Are there things you still need to be doing?
Normal is pretty hard to put your finger on right now in this economy that we're working in. But we're always looking for ways to create more jobs. And we were talking about how do we create an even more skilled workforce than what we already have. And this last week we announced a program where our community college is going to be working with our technical institutions and directly working with the business community to give direction about here's what we need. Here are the skilled workers that we need. And those community colleges, technical institutions, very quickly they're nimble when it comes to getting programs up and running, being able to develop that skilled workforce. And I think that's one of the reasons we've been able to stay in the game.
And you were saying how critical community colleges are.
Absolutely.
To two things. One is the skilled workforce, but the other is the attraction of businesses to Texas.
Community colleges are going to play even more important role. I think we're going into a transformational period on education, period, whether it's K through 12 or whether it's the next
and
years
I was
up.
listening, and I'm thinking, what's right for Texas, how can they possibly know in Washington? How can the Department of Education help Texas? Can they at all? I mean, where are you on this, Rick? I'm sorry, Steve.
Interesting.
That I called you Rick? No, because of Rick Ferris, but no, not because of Rick.
At least it wasn't Penelope.
Yeah. At least I didn't call you. When you run, if I call you Penelope.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah.
Was the Department?
that one
you wanted to get rid of? Wasn't that one that you want to get rid of? Department.
Yeah,
how many employees they got? I mean, it's
the role they
idea
play
of giving
is,
it down to the states.
Listen, the idea that a Department of Education in Washington D.C. Should be making decisions for each of the states is just ludicrous. It's from a constitutional standpoint, it just is not functional.
And when was it? 1980? It wasn't. I mean, it's a relatively recent addition that
it's just a black hole of money that comes and creates more bureaucracy, and then they try to dictate to the states. Here, Race to the Top's a good example of it. We told them, with all due respect, we don't want to participate in Race to the Top. Because we asked them, well, can we take a look at the national standards that you want to put in place, and can we see the tests? Well, those aren't done yet. Not unlike these exchanges. I know I'm jumping around here, but the exchanges on the Obamacare, the rules haven't been written yet. They've asked us to be participating in this thing, and the rules aren't written yet.
I want to come at this not as an economics reporter, but as spent a ridiculous amount of time preparing for state exams.
Yeah.
Right.
And the actual learning involved in preparing for those exams is, I think, de minimis. I don't think there's anything really involved. They're trying to get their scores up because it has to do with the funding and that whole thing. That has to stop. That is not learning. That is test taking.
This last week we started backing away from making those tests be part of the way that you gauge the performance of the schools.
Oh, we
realize
that's fantastic.
Accountability is important, not backing away from the accountability,
right.
but the idea that we need to be given 12 or 15 tests is just
right. And the attitude of the kids is they get an attitude of gaming the system.
Right.
Oh, well, this is not a state test. This is a state test. And so their whole demeanor towards the school system, it gets undermined.
That's the reason that I made the statement. The next decade, you're going to see the biggest transformation in public education in the history of this country. We're going to see some more charter schools. We're going to see some great movement.